Kurt Russell. What if I told you that a graveyard plot was the greatest gift one actor ever gave another? Not flowers, not a watch, not a bottle of expensive whiskey. An actual burial plot, picked out by hand, in a real Old West cemetery. That's the story we're diving into today. And by the end of it, you'll understand why two grown men buying each other's cemetery real estate might just be the most touching thing to ever come out of Hollywood. We're talking about Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, and the film that bonded them forever, Tombstone. For over 30 years, people have wondered what really went on behind the scenes of that movie. Was the chemistry between these two just good acting? Or was there something real happening off camera? Kurt Russell finally answered that question, and honestly, the answer is better than anything the rumor mill ever cooked up. But to get there, we need to rewind the clock and understand just how much chaos was boiling under the surface of what became one of the greatest westerns ever put on film. Picture this. It's the spring of 1993. Cameras are rolling in the Arizona desert. On the surface, everything looks like a normal Hollywood shoot. Underneath that surface, though, this production was a mess. Nobody watching the finished film would ever guess how close it came to falling apart. Tombstone told the story of Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Johnny Ringo, and Curly Bill Brocious, and the legendary shootout at the OK Corral that's been burned into American folklore for over a century. It's the kind of story that's been told 100 times, but this version had something different. It had grit. It had characters that felt lived in rather than just costumed. And it had a cast that could go toe-to-toe with each other in every single scene. Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, Bill Paxton, Powers Booth, Michael Biehn, Dana Delaney, Charlton Heston, with Robert Mitchum narrating the whole thing like an old ghost telling you a campfire story. But here's what audiences never saw. The man who wrote the script, Kevin Jarre, was given his first ever shot at directing. It was a huge opportunity, and it started falling apart almost immediately. Filming fell behind. Scenes weren't getting finished. The studio started sweating. Just weeks into shooting, Jarre was pulled off the project entirely, and veteran director George Cosmatos stepped in to try and save the whole thing. Now, stepping into someone else's movie halfway through is never a clean job, and to this day, people who worked on that set remember that period completely differently depending on who you ask. Some say it was a smooth transition. Others say it was pure chaos. Either way, the script kept getting rewritten as they went. Subplots got cut, scenes got reshaped, and the movie kept changing shape right up until it hit theaters. And yet, despite all that behind-the-scenes turbulence, nobody cut corners on making the world feel real. Every costume, every prop, every dusty storefront was built to transport you straight into the 1880s. Val Kilmer spent hours and hours perfecting Doc Holliday's lightning-fast draw and his slow southern drawl, working to make every syllable sound like it belonged to a dying, brilliant, dangerous man. Even the facial hair got obsessive attention to detail. When Tombstone finally hit theaters on Christmas Day in 1993, it was going up against some serious holiday competition. Didn't matter. Word of mouth carried it, and the film ended up pulling in over $73 million worldwide. Critics loved it. And Val Kilmer's performance as Doc Holliday? That became one of the most talked about performances in the history of the Western genre. Over the years, Tombstone went from box office hit to full-blown cult classic, the kind of movie people quote at parties without even realizing they're quoting a movie. But as its legend grew, so did the whispers about what actually happened on set. Different cast members told different versions of events. Some stories matched up, others contradicted each other completely. It took decades before one of the men at the center of it all decided to set the record straight. Now, let's back up even further, because to really understand why Kurt Russell's role in this story matters so much, you've got to understand who Kurt Russell actually is. Kurt Russell. Long before he strapped on a badge and became one of the most iconic versions of Wyatt Earp ever filmed, Kurt Russell had already lived about 3 careers' worth of experience. Born in March of 1951 in Springfield, Massachusetts, Kurt grew up in a house where performing wasn't some far-off dream, it was just Tuesday. His dad, Bing Russell, was a working actor who spent years appearing in TV westerns. His mom had been a dancer. The family eventually moved out to Thousand Oaks, California, and Kurt grew up right in the middle of the entertainment world, with his 3 sisters. But acting wasn't the only thing pulling at him. Baseball had his heart too. All through school he was a talented second baseman, spending countless afternoons on the diamond. He graduated high school in 1969, but by then, he'd already been working as an actor for years. His first TV appearances go all the way back to 1962, popping up on shows like Dennis the Menace. That same year, he tried out for a baseball movie, hoping to meet his childhood heroes Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. He didn't get the part, but it didn't slow him down one bit. More roles kept coming. Guest spots on The Man from UNCLL, Gilligan's Island. His first big-screen role came in 1963. Then Walt Disney Studios noticed him, and just like that, young Kurt Russell became one of their go-to stars. Movie after movie rolled out through the 60s, and a whole generation of kids grew up thinking of him as one of Disney's brightest young faces. Here's the wild part, though. Even as his acting career was taking off, Russell refused to give up on baseball. Instead of picking one path, he chased both at the same time. In 1971, he signed a minor league contract and spent 2 seasons playing in the Northwest League, developing into a genuine all-star infielder. For a stretch there, it actually looked like professional baseball might become his real future. Then, in 1973, disaster struck. A serious shoulder injury required surgery, right after he'd made it up to the AA level. That injury ended his baseball dream before it ever got the chance to reach the majors. Funny enough, baseball ran in the family. His father had played in the minors too, and years later, his nephew would actually make it all the way to Major League Baseball. On top of all that, from 1969 to 1975, Russell was also serving in the California Air National Guard. Actor, athlete, serviceman, all before he turned 25. With baseball gone, Russell poured everything back into acting. And unlike a lot of former child stars who fade out once they grow up, he made the jump to adult roles look effortless. He didn't get stuck being the Disney guy. Instead, he chased tougher, grittier characters, and in the 70s, his performances playing Elvis Presley in a TV film earned him real critical praise. That project also introduced him to a director named John Carpenter, and that partnership became one of the most legendary actor-director combos in modern film history. Together, Russell and Carpenter made Escape from New York in 1981, and Russell's performance as Snake Plissken, eye patch and all, became an instant icon. It reached cult status and turned Kurt Russell into a genuine leading man. Then came The Thing, in 1982, now considered one of the greatest sci-fi horror films ever made. He showed off his dramatic chops opposite Meryl Streep in Silkwood, and then starred alongside Goldie Hawn in Swing Shift in 1984. The movie didn't do much at the box office, but it changed his life completely, because that's where he and Goldie Hawn began a relationship that's now one of the longest-running and most admired partnerships in all of Hollywood. Through the rest of the 80s, Russell bounced between genres like it was nothing. Crime dramas, thrillers, action films, comedies, then came Backdraft in 1991, proving he could carry heavy, dramatic material just as easily as he handled explosive action. And then, in 1993, came Tombstone. It became one of the defining roles of his entire career. His Wyatt Earp anchored the whole film and helped turn it into the cult classic it is today. But like we said, very few people realized just how much drama was happening behind the cameras, while audiences fell in love with what they saw on screen. Russell didn't slow down after that either. Stargate. A reunion with John Carpenter on Escape from L.A. Miracle, Poseidon, Quentin Tarantino's Death Proof, and The Hateful Eight, Deepwater Horizon, multiple Fast and Furious films, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He even played Santa Claus alongside Goldie Hawn in The Christmas Chronicles, and popped up in Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. By the time Tombstone hit its 30th anniversary, Kurt Russell had built a career spanning more than 6 decades. And still, out of everything he's ever done, that one movie kept generating more curiosity than almost anything else in his filmography. Now let's talk about how that legendary cast actually came together, because it almost looked completely different. Believe it or not, Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer weren't the first choices for these roles. Kevin Costner was originally offered Wyatt Earp. William Dafoe was in talks to play Doc Holliday. At the time, Costner already had his own interest in telling Wyatt Earp's story, and instead of joining this project, he went off and made his own version, which became the movie Wyatt Earp in 1994. Val Kilmer actually became interested in the role of Doc Holliday, partly because Costner was attached. But once Costner backed out, Kilmer stayed on anyway. Looking back, that decision changed everything, because his performance as the witty, dying gunslinger became one of the most celebrated of his entire career. And before Kurt Russell ever put on that badge, the filmmakers actually wanted his close friend Jeff Bridges to play Wyatt Earp. Bridges passed. Russell stepped in. One of those classic Hollywood what-ifs that completely reshaped how this movie turned out. Meanwhile, screenwriter Kevin Jarre wasn't messing around with research either. Instead of just reading history books, he actually moved to the real town of Tombstone, Arizona for a while. He dug into the local history, visited the real landmarks connected to Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, and even went through a cowboy camp, learning to ride horses, handle guns, and wear a holster the way lawmen actually did back in the 1880s. He didn't want to write about the Old West. He wanted to feel it, and it shows. To this day, plenty of historians consider Tombstone one of the most convincing depictions of the OK Corral shootout ever put on screen. That obsession with detail touched everything, right down to the facial hair. Sam Elliott's mustache as Virgil Earp became almost as famous as his performance. And get this, Elliott's own family is reportedly connected to the real Wyatt Earp's descendants, meaning that mustache had actual historical roots in the Earp family. Hollywood still gave nature a little help though, adding mascara to make it look even fuller on camera. Director George Cosmatos brought his own personal history into the project too. As a kid growing up in Italy, he watched the 1957 film Gunfight at the OK Corral and dreamed of one day directing his own version of that legendary showdown. Years later, when the chance actually came, he made sure the climactic gunfight was filmed at the real OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona. Throughout filming, he treated the story less like a straightforward Western and more like a sweeping American tragedy. And that philosophy shaped everything from the acting to the way big scenes were staged. Val Kilmer matched that same obsession with authenticity. The real Doc Holliday wasn't known for playing the banjo, but Kilmer learned it anyway, just to make one scene feel completely real. Kurt Russell trained extensively with a legendary firearms instructor to master 1880s-style revolvers, learning to draw fast, reload quickly, and fan the hammer just like real frontier gunslingers did. He didn't just want to look convincing, he wanted every movement to be accurate. The production built an entire town from scratch, using old photographs and historical records. Over 65 buildings across 12 acres. Actors said walking through that finished set genuinely felt like stepping back into 1881. Some of the best moments weren't even scripted in detail. Billy Bob Thornton's unforgettable scene as the bullying Johnny Tyler was mostly improvised, and it ended up being one of the standout moments of the whole film, helping launch him toward becoming one of Hollywood's most respected actors. Not everything survived the editing room, though. The romance between Wyatt Earp and Josephine Marcus, played by Dana Delaney, originally had a much bigger role in the film. Test audiences felt it pulled focus away from the main story, so a lot of it got trimmed before release. The final cut kept its focus tight on loyalty, sacrifice, and revenge, the themes that still define the movie today. One scene in particular shocked audiences at the time, when Curly Bill Brocious casually brags about a horrific act of violence against Mexican victims. It's never shown, but the implication alone was enough to rattle 1993 movie audiences, at a time when most Westerns avoided going anywhere near that kind of darkness. It reminded everyone that this wasn't some sanitized version of the Old West. For Kurt Russell personally, this role meant more than just another paycheck. Playing Wyatt Earp fulfilled a dream he'd carried since he was a little kid, idolizing classic cowboy heroes like John Wayne. Before filming even started, the entire cast went through a brutal 2-week boot camp, learning horseback riding, gun handling, stagecoach driving, even blacksmithing. By the time cameras rolled, they weren't just wearing costumes, they actually knew how to live like people from the 1880s. Even the smaller props carried real history. Doc Holliday's elegant cup and saucer, the one he sips from during card games, reportedly once belonged to the real Doc Holliday before the film's prop team tracked it down and bought it from a private collector. Today, it's still on display at a saloon in Tombstone, Arizona. Sam Elliott almost wasn't even part of this movie. He'd mostly stepped away from Hollywood, frustrated with the industry, but the script grabbed his attention, and knowing Kurt Russell had already signed on, sealed the deal. And here's something worth remembering. By the early 90s, Hollywood had basically written off the Western as a dead genre. Nobody thought audiences cared about frontier stories anymore. Tombstone proved everybody wrong, and in doing so, it helped spark new life into a genre that had been fading for years. Now, finally, let's get to the story you've been waiting for. The story that finally answered decades of speculation about what Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer's relationship was really like off-camera. For years, fans debated it. Was their chemistry just two skilled actors doing their jobs? Or was there something real behind it? Kurt Russell put that question to rest with a story that's honestly better than anything anyone could have made up. When filming wrapped, the cast had this unofficial tradition of trading gifts, just a small, thoughtful way of marking the end of a wild shoot. Kurt Russell decided to go all out for his co-star. He had his driver quietly track down pieces of Val Kilmer's actual costume from the film. His holster, his gun, his hat, even his personalized director's chair, and had them photographed as part of the surprise. But that wasn't even the real gift. Russell's actual present was something that fit Doc Holliday's character perfectly. He bought Val Kilmer a burial plot at Boot Hill Graveyard in Tombstone, Arizona, the real historic cemetery where actual figures from the Old West are buried. It was dark, it was hilarious, and Russell knew exactly how much Kilmer would appreciate the joke. Here's the kicker, though. The second Kilmer opened that gift, he told his own driver to bring out something in return. Turns out, Kilmer had been thinking along almost the exact same lines. Instead of a burial plot, he'd bought Kurt Russell an entire acre of land overlooking that same cemetery. Neither one had planned it. Both actors, completely independently, decided the perfect gift involved death and the Old West. It's the kind of coincidence you couldn't script if you tried, and it says everything about the bond these two built while making this film. Russell later reflected that the whole exchange fit perfectly. Doc Holliday had always represented death, always one foot in the grave, while Wyatt Earp represented life, someone determined to survive no matter what. Somehow, without either of them planning it, their gifts mirrored their characters exactly. That story means even more today, because Val Kilmer passed away on April 1, 2025, at 65 years old. His daughter confirmed the cause was pneumonia. Years earlier, he'd fought through throat cancer after being diagnosed back in 2014, and had actually recovered before this final illness took him. When the news broke, tributes poured in from all across Hollywood, people remembering his fearless talent and his unforgettable screen presence. But out of everything said about Val Kilmer after he passed, Kurt Russell's story about that graveyard gift might be the most personal tribute of all. Behind the legend, behind decades of rumors and speculation, was a real friendship built on mutual respect, shared humor, and the kind of bond that only comes from surviving something as chaotic and unforgettable as that shoot together. So here's a question for you. What's your favorite scene from Tombstone? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if you enjoyed digging into this story with me, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and stick around, because there's another story just like this one waiting for you next.